I am a master of light novels in Japan. Brief introduction. This is a creative world with girls, novelists, old thieves, and reminders, as well as cartoonists, and then integrate all the elements into a passionate story similar to the series. The first volume of The Hot-Blooded Novelist debuts Chapter 1. The debt-laden novelist at 3 in the morning, an ordinary apartment building in Shinjuku, Tokyo. In room 505 on the 5th floor, the living room was still lit, and Li Yan sat at the table facing the computer for 3 full hours. At present, the computer screen is densely packed with thousands of first drafts. Although these words are not many, it cost him a lot of modifications, settings, ideas, and finally completed the proud results. However, even if he was inspired, Li Yan was still nervous and took a deep breath. "Edit system, turn it on," Li Yan said calmly. In an instant, a certain external force was activated in Li Yan's consciousness. In an instant, lines of text in the computer were continuously absorbed, analyzed, and processed, and the content of the words was finally reported in an instant. Value. Perhaps it was destined to be destined. Li Yan's writing skills are very solid, and he is also a well-known person at the starting point. Writer. Therefore, Li Yan, who has a deep understanding of the theory of traversal, picked up the keyboard again and took advantage of his super editing system. Although it was not very useful, he started his life of writing light novels to make money and pay off debts. Nearly harsh novel conception and improvement E&D and were judged again and again in the editing system, and gradually upgraded to B+. In the end, Li Yan wrote this excellent light novel with A+. After 2 months of serialization, Li Yan, whose pen name is the 4th-ranked novelist by the Japanese light novel publishing house. In the first half of the comprehensive statistics of major libraries, Li Yan's Super Academy War published a 3-volume novel, directly sold 430,000 copies in a few months of sales, exceeding the original 2 years in one fell swoop. The 4th novel work, Love Metronome, replaced the position of love novel master Xiaoshizi. Now sales are also a direct threat to the 3rd best-selling novel named Yamada Ilfu. Because of such a blockbuster, he was officially regarded as a novel genius and was given the title of. However, such a master is also a real poor man who cannot afford 200 yen a caddy of tea. Almost all of the money was sent back to the country to repay the debt to the parents. No way, Kevin, can't think of a more interesting plot. He leaned on the office chair and took a short break, but after thinking about it, he took his little book of living expenses and budgeted the expenditure plan for the next month. Send a deposit of 900,000 yuan to my home, as well as my own living expenses, examination fees, and a little for the utilities and living expenses next month. I originally planned to do some other things to relax when I couldn't keep writing, but when I saw my financial book, I became even more distressed. No matter how I calculate it, the money is not enough. If this continues, sooner or later, I have to find an aunt for assistance. Boom boom boom, suddenly, the phone on the computer desk rang. Who else will call me at this time? Li Yan was taken aback for a moment, then picked up the phone and looked at it. The screen impressively showed, Kagurazaka Calamus. Suddenly, Li Yan's face turned blue, and he put the phone directly on the table and stepped back 2 steps. Kagurazaka Ayam, 22 years old, a professional beauty who looks like a college student, is also the direct editor of his novel publication library. These days almost every day, he calls on time at 7 o'clock in the morning to remind him of the draft. Once a week, he would personally come to the door to guard him to finish a chapter well. It was like a demon. The most important thing is that when we first met, the editing system had told him that Kagurazaka Ayam was a character from the light novel My Sister is Teacher Huang Man. From then on, he really understood that he was where he was. In the parallel world, he lives in the fictitious light novel characters he knows. Moreover, Ms. Kagurazaka Ayam is this world version of Huang Stong. Whatever she says will work, and she doesn't want to get close at all. Stop it, Kagurazaka-san, it's already 3 o'clock in the evening, go to bed. Li Yan covered his forehead and said in annoyance. But it rang again and again, and Li Yan understood that the editor's perseverance was enough to chase him to the end of the world, and finally let him get through the call. Hey, Lord Goddess, it's me, Xiao Li. Li Yan coughed a few times and said in a happy tone. Oh, you really haven't slept yet? A young woman's words came over the phone. Yes, yes, didn't you also sleep up? Li Yangqiang smiled. After all, in business, it is impossible not to laugh out. Well, after all, there will be a half-day rest tomorrow. By the way, you are already an adult, aren't you? Freshman candidate sang, next time your sister will bring you out for a good drink, will it be enough? No, in addition to preparing for the exam, I have to rush the manuscript and go to the cram school. I can't make it. Li Yan said troubledly. He heard that this female editor is especially good at drinking, and he also has to drink. The bad habits of others. So, what are you doing now, I guess, seeing you still awake so late, can't you write it? On the phone, the voice of I can't write it out seemed to pierce his heart deeply like a spear. Li Yan covered his heart, vaguely feeling uncomfortable. Li Yan had already planned to end the topic, and said annoyedly, please don't say that, Calvin, it's just a little Calvin, which author is not Calvin? And some even announced that they would kidnap him and lock him in a small dark room and personally force him to write all the rest of the story. A crime declaration, I really have to guard against it. During the summer vacation of school, I was invited by Sanhe Library to work as an illustrator for Super Academy War. Aiming at the fame of this series of light novels, Ying Rairi paid special attention to this opportunity to practice. As a result, she left home under the pretext of traveling and came to Shinjuku to rent a room on the 6th floor. The location is closest to Sanwa Bunko Company. The headquarters, the environment is relatively comfortable, the apartment security system is comprehensive, living here can also let go of her hands and feet to complete the work of illustration and fan comics. Speaking of it, although she lost her underwear, she is not worried that the Chinese otaku who is also a high school student downstairs will be interested in her underwear. Although she can't tell the specific truth, she will have it after knowing her for a month. For this experience, this person is a kind of single-celled organism paramecium. Boom boom boom. Ying Lily knocked on the door and said sternly, open the door, Otako Li, I know you are at home, don't play on the computer, open the door for me. That one. Suddenly, a female office worker in room 504 was awakened, and she opened the door with a sleepy expression and said, that high school student just went out. Really? Ying Lily asked in surprise. She also painted all night last night, knowing that the guy downstairs should not rest until 3 o'clock in the evening. He was not sleeping and went out. Well, although I rarely go out, it seems that I went out early in the morning because I was going to a cram school, said the female resident wearing glasses. Ying Rairi said in surprise, is that right? This guy is so serious about studying, I didn't see it. But when she recovered, Irie immediately realized her gaffe, bowed to this female neighbor, and said apologetically, I am Irie Kashiwagi in room 605. I am sorry to disturb you. It's okay, after all, I should get up at this time, but I had a hangover with my colleague last night. Just call me Kobayashi. Please give me some advice in the future, Miss Kashiwagi. She smiled and said. She still looks like a very gentle woman. Ying Lily thinks the neighbor of the Otako Li is really good. But the moment Xiaolin closed the door, a little girl with long white hair appeared in the room again. She glanced at Ying Lily with a dull look, and the door closed properly. The little girl just now is so cute, but, white hair is rare. Did you make a mistake just now? I always think there are dragon horns, are you playing cosplay? Ying Lily thought. Ms. Kimura, the total cost this time is 10,000 yen, thank you for your patronage. Downstairs in the apartment, Li Yan wore a white shirt and black trousers, looking like an office worker. His fairly handsome face with a gentle smile said to a charming middle-aged woman. The middle-aged woman nodded with a smile, took out her wallet, and gave a stack of 1,000 yen to Li Yan. She smiled and said, where, I have been taken care of by you. These hours are really hard for you, like you. Excellent high school students, it must be very hard to live like this. Li Yan smiled embarrassedly and said, nothing. After all, I am in urgent need of living expenses. It is also a fate to be able to serve you. I still hope to be able to contact frequently in the future and the phone will be available on call. Yes, please give me your advice in the future. Ms. Kimura nodded, turned around and got into a Lexus car with the highest configuration. She drove away, looking like she was driving Li Yan back. Out of courtesy, Li Yan stopped to look. After seeing Ms. Kimura out of sight, he breathed a sigh of relief. He looked tired and felt a lot of weight loss. I went to bed at 3 o'clock last night, got up at 7:30 to go to a Tahur cram school, and ended up working part-time for 2 hours. This kind of life is indeed a bit tiring. What? Suddenly, Li Yan heard someone making a hoarse sigh of emotion. He turned around and looked at the girl with golden double ponytails and thick spectacles, looking at him secretly at the door of the apartment. Complex. This is a girl character from How to Raise a Passerby heroine. When he first met this otaku who knocked on the door, the editing system reported that she was also a girl from the world of light novels. Hidri Kashiwagi was a neighbor who moved to his upstairs in the second week after he crossed. A typical housemaid, this outfit has an indescribable sense of decadence and casualness. By the way, Li Yan got to know this neighbor because of the printed on the balcony with a brown bear. With a drop of cold sweat on her forehead, Ying Lily asked with disappointment and sorrow for the society, Otaku Li, have you finally started to have a compensated dating because you are too poor? What? Li Yan was startled, his eyes widened, and angrily said, what kind of compensated dating, do you think I am going for compensated dating? Like, it should be said that it is. Ying Lily shrugged and answered naturally. He looks very clean, and has a pretty and stubborn face, and a slender figure. He always deals with middle-aged women enthusiastically and always talks about lack of money. How can such a high school student not look like this? Come out to comfort middle-aged and elderly women's aided dating teenagers. Ying Lily continued, and the price is 10,000 yen per hour, which is a standard price for a compensated dating girl. Didn't you just serve that beauty for an hour? Don't talk nonsense, this money is what I paid for Miss Kimura's 2 hours of tutoring her son who went to elementary school, and I must let her child enter the top 10 next time, otherwise half of the money will be refunded. As Li Yan was talking, he was taken aback and asked, how do you know the price of postponement? What are you talking about, being a cartoonist, how can I not know such information that is well known in society? Ying Lily said with an arrogant smile. I'm not complimenting you. Li Yan breathed a sigh of relief and thought in silence. Although it was clear that this young girl named Hidri Kashiwagi was a fan painter and became such an acquaintance after knowing him for a while, he has always had an inexplicable resentment towards her calling him Otaku Li. At this moment, Ying Lily noticed that he was holding a book in his hand. Love Metronome Volume 4. Do you also read Xia Shi's book? Ying Lily asked coldly. This one. Li Yan glanced at the book he had just bought. This was for a meeting. The authors gave gifts when they signed each other as a convention to show that they had read and respected each other's work. But he hates watching romance works. Yes, I'm going to take a look. Li Yan said with a melancholy expression. Why, it feels so painful. Ying Lily thought in confusion. Sure enough, this guy is indeed a weird person. I advise you to lose it. What's so good about something like that, Otaku Li? One day, I will show you what a real work of art is. Ying Lily said coldly, turning around and planning to leave. Li Yan was startled. He always felt that this arrogant double ponytail particularly disliked this author, and his words seemed to make people shiver like the Siberian Korean wave. "Wait a minute, I almost forgot, my underwear is still in your house, give it back to me as soon as possible." Ying Lily remembered something and immediately turned around and said. People passing by looked at them with complicated expressions. Li Yan looked at Ying Lily with a bewildered expression. Who can understand the bitterness in his heart? Chapter 3 Encountering Miss Angel. Halfway Sanwa Library is currently one of the fastest growing light novel library companies in Tokyo. In the 15 years since the establishment of the company, it has successively launched several hot-selling light novels, which have gradually become known to readers across the country. Especially among the top 10 popular light novel writers, 3 are all contracted authors of this company. In particular, the first fantasy light novel writer Qinchao Qinzheng, the fourth hot-blooded light novel writer Yu Sujian, and the fifth love novel master Xia Shizi, can be described as strong, although not the strongest library company, but it is enough to influence the development direction of the light novel market. It was about to get off work, and there was a small news from the headquarters of Sanhei Library. Ms. Yusuji is coming over to visit Miss Kagurazaka. I have also heard that although I am a contracted author of our company, I have never come forward. I heard that the president will not even come by personal invitation and refuse to be photographed. He is really a mysterious author. Senior, is that exaggeration? Takahashi, you are a newcomer this month. That time of invitation was a small disturbance. Anyway, Yusuji-sensei is indeed a weird person. When everyone was talking about it, suddenly, a man in a white coat, mask, and peaked cap walked in from the door. He lowered his head like an agent, and walked hurriedly from the office corridor as if he was trying to cover his eyes. After that, I followed Kagurazaka Iris into the reception room of the editorial department. The staff of Sanhei Company looked at each other one after another. They were quite sure that the writer Yusujian was a 100% weird person. Li Yan actually didn't want to dress like this, but he had his own reasons. As known to the outside world as Shameless Yusuji, he has been living as a light novel master who has been threatened to be kidnapped and tuned by outside book fans. Li Yan is very smart to prevent his personal information from being exposed, so if he really wants to go to Shan Yan's identity when going in and out of public places, you must wrap yourself up and stay away from the mundane world. After all, a senior manga master known as the Old Thief has been beaten by drawing fans in the street. When I first received a message from you to come in person, I was taken aback. Kagurazaka Ariu smiled and locked the door to prevent others from coming in. She poured a cup of coffee in front of Li Yan, smiled and blinked one eye, and asked, "The last time you entered the company, it should be when the contract was signed 2 months ago. At that time, no one knew that you would be the fourth well-known light novel writer in the future." Thank you for hosting me in your busy schedule, Kagurazaka-san. Li Yan smiled awkwardly, recalling the time when he was stinky, sweaty and dusty, and signed the contract with a panic on his face. This was only 2 months ago. Yeah, so, is it really the same thing that was communicated on the mobile phone? Kagurazaka Icarus sat opposite Li Yan and asked. Yes, it is. Li Yan took off his hat and mask, finally took a breath of fresh air, then turned on the illustration page of the novel, and said, although I admit that this illustration teacher named Zekin is very good at painting, but I don't think he is very suitable to be my illustrator. Why, according to my eyes, Sawamura's style and content are quite in line with the story of your novel, I really didn't see any violation. Kagurazaka Icarus intends to continue to persuade this stubborn Li Yan, but Li Yan shook his head. Li Yan flipped through the novel and showed Kagurazaka Icarus with the illustrations of the 3rd volume. His eyes were fire-breathing, and he vented his emotions and said, No, Kagurazaka-san, it's a matter of style. Although I have noticed it before, but as a newcomer, I can't have too many suggestions on illustrations, but Kagurazaka-san, although I need money very much, I am also a serious novel author. I can't use paintings for passionate works. The wind has become so cute. In this era, everyone generally accepts the cute style of painting. If you follow the style of your Bai Du Shen Chuan, it is estimated that this work is really ruined. The light novel was originally intended to be the cute style. Kagura Saka Changpu explained with a wry smile. Li Yan was taken aback, thought for a moment, and said, "No, I don't object to the cute style of painting, just..." He pointed to the girl characters in the illustrations, and asked with a dark face, "Doesn't Kagurazaka-san think that this expression seems to be similar to the style of painting in some 18th Prohibition manga?" Kagurazaka Ayam heard what he said, and after careful study, gradually, the more she looked at it, the more she felt that she was about to climax like a book, and this long-time editor had to blush slightly. "Stand up. Well, after all, it's a fairly well-known 18 forbidden." Kagurazaka Ayam whispered, but when he realized that he had missed something, he immediately coughed and said nothing. What did you just say, 18 bans?" Li Yan asked, suddenly startled. The blood and 18 prohibitions are simply a step in philosophical history. Although she is a well-known painter of the 18 forbidden city, I still think she is the illustrator most suitable for your novel. Our company has always attached great importance to absorbing this talented painter into our team. Teach her important works like you to design illustrations." Kagurazaka Ayam explained calmly. Li Yan couldn't help but vomit and said, "That wouldn't make the female character who was originally suffering from the injury feel like an expression of being pushed into the air." "Ahem, don't talk about these yellow accents in front of girls, Li Jun." Kagurazaka Icarus coughed a few reminders, and said with a blushing cheek. No, this is not a yellow tone, this is an objective rhetoric." Li Yan said helplessly at the shy Kagurazaka. Kagurazaka Ayam smiled and said, "I understand, what you said does have some truth. After all, your novel does not need any exposed illustrations to increase the popularity. It should be said that after graduation, I worked as an editor in this company. Once I received such a blockbuster pure-blood novel from you, there is no decent love story, but it is still so popular, it is really beyond my expectation." Kagurazaka Ayam originally thought that a total of 8 volumes of novels should be able to sell 400,000 copies of good results, but only 3 volumes exceeded 400,000. But Li Yan certainly knew that this book would become popular, because his editing system had already told him that the quality of this book was A+, which catered to the light novel market. "I see, if it takes time to change the painter, I will make specific arrangements," Kagurazaka Ayam said with a smile. "Then trouble you." A big rock fell in Li Yan's heart. He did everything for his novel to be close to perfection without any consideration. "Well, by the way, don't be late for the Saturday party," Kagurazaka Ayam said with a grim smile. Li Yan swallowed, and after bowing, put on a hat and a mask and left the reception room with his head bowed. After sending off Li Yan, Kagurazaka Icarus quietly thought about other candidates. If there is another person, it can only be a powerful faction like Iramanga, but it seems that she is also an comics teacher. So, it's really difficult to find an illustrator who has inherited the Sawamura style and changed it to a passionate style. The company does not have such a talent. Kagurazaka Ayam thought. Suddenly, Kagurazaka Icarus suddenly thought of the illustration that Li Yan described as feeling like an expression of being pushed up to fly, and his white cheeks became slightly ruddy again. "It really feels..." Li Yan secretly took off his coat, mask, and hat in the deserted alley, put it in his backpack, and ran to his apartment on a bicycle. After finally persuading Ms. Kagurazaka Ayam, Li Yan was relaxed at the moment, and went back home to continue conceiving the plot of the 4th volume. This night, he must advance to the second half of the plot. In the evening, the air was a bit cold. Li Yan rode his bicycle through the complex Tokyo residential area, but when he passed a park, there was a quarrel in the dark corner of the park. It's still a girl. Li Yan braked immediately, and looked at that corner faintly. 3 or 4 gangsters Huang Moch and Fat Man surrounded the low-headed high school female students with a little dazzling hair. Ah, the bullying in the light novel legend, there are indeed many in reality. Li Yan thought. Hey, you golden retriever, do you plan to use this attitude when you hit me? Huang Mao said with a sullen expression. Hehe, really a terrible guy, don't think that you can get carried away if you are more beautiful. The fat man smiled and said. The female high school student lowered her head, as if she hadn't heard anything. She was completely unmoved by wearing huge headphones, and her attitude was indeed a bit more brutal. Either go and play with us, or kneel down, and apologize, then let you go. Huang Mao Ji sneered. I always feel like a woman with an arrogant attitude, have you heard us talking? The third person said. Li Yan locked the bicycle, put his backpack away, walked over and smiled gently at them and said, it's okay to apologize, but why must she kneel down? Well, who are you, what's the matter? Huang Mao asked, turning his head, with a full face. But under the dim light, Li Yan's eyes burst into a ferocious chill, and he slammed the yellow-haired cheek with a punch, causing the 140 catty man to fly over with a few teeth. Everyone was shocked, looking at the ruffian light novel master Li Yan who had torn off his tie. This is an apology, you. Li Yan looked at them with a murderous sneer and said. Chapter 4 Online Game Girl Gabriel. Although he feels that he is not a saint, what Li Yan hates most is to let others kneel down to apologize. Human knees are precious. You can kneel down to the heavens, kneel down to the gods, kneel down to the benefactor, and kneel down to your parents and ancestors in the middle. Others do not have this qualification. Suddenly, as if the ground was beginning to vibrate, Li Yan had already fought with this group of gangsters, fighting extremely fiercely and madly. Obviously, the opponent was not a fuel-efficient lamp, and immediately began to encircle and attempt to control Li Yan. Suddenly, the fat man hugged Li Yan directly from behind, and Li Yan directly used his head to slam the fat man into the air. Ah! The fat man suddenly screamed. Li Yan immediately turned around, and suddenly kicked Huang Mao who had gotten up again. Li Yan's eyes sharpened, avoiding other people's surroundings, and hitting the opponent's chin with another punch, resounding a crisp fracture. Li Yan's moves are all fierce moves, and they are not reasonable at all. In 3 minutes, the roaring park gradually became quiet. As a result, there was only one Huang Mao who had his mouth crooked facing the Li Yan who was hiding in the darkness alone. He stepped back step by step, already shaking with fright. After some effort, it was finally resolved quickly. Li Yan thought to himself, he broke his wrists and walked towards Huang Mao. He stretched out his hand to pull him up, but the fat man behind him suddenly lifted the wooden box placed in the park and slammed it directly on Li Yan's back. A loud noise actually smashed it to pieces, but the one person didn't move. You are so kind of TM, fat man. In the middle of the night, Li Yan looked back at the fat man with ferocious eyes. Suddenly, the fat man was frightened and took a few steps back. In an instant, the yellow hair was thrown out by Li Yan with one hand, and hit the fat man directly. Li Yan panted slightly, with blood dripping from his forehead, looking at the painful rolling over the floor, and asked with a sneer, "Is it over? What's the matter? There is no one who can fight. Asshole, remember it to me." "Ah, what are you talking nonsense, let's go." The few adult strong men in front of them had been beaten half-handed, and got up one by one, limping and escaping. Li Yan quietly watched them leave and wiped the blood from his forehead. Sure enough, the body of this world was really fragile, and it was broken when it was smashed like this. Li Yan looked at the rogue who was far away, and gradually, he began to cover his back. Okay. The blonde girl was still watching the hero who had rescued her quietly. Although she didn't have any intentions to care about him, she saw his strange actions. Ah! Ah 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 ah! Li Yan suddenly let out a scream, covered his back and squatted on the ground, and shouted, "It hurts, that stinky fat guy, that's a brand new wooden box, comparable to the hardness of concrete. My back, oops, my back is broken." The blonde and petite female high school student was shocked. She stared at the hero blankly and rolled around on the ground at this moment. Although the heroic image in her heart was shattered, it was understandably painful. "Are you okay?" The girl lowered her head and asked casually. Li Yan got up, touched his back painfully, shook his head, and said with a smile, "Forget it, it will be all right in a few days. It doesn't hurt to the point, it's just flesh and blood. It will be fine in a few days, you are simply made of steel." The girl looked at him in such a state, and said in surprise, "What a monster, a weird person." Under the dim light, Li Yan could really see the appearance of this young girl. This young girl with some foreign descent, fair and smooth skin, slender, slightly dazzling golden long hair, that pair some sloppy eyes, beautiful facial features seem to be angels. Wearing a sportswear, but showing slender legs. Which is basically the name of a Westerner. The upper part is the house girl from the light novel world, and the lower part is the fallen angel from the comics. I really feel that this parallel world has an inside story that he doesn't know. Forget it, wait, let's talk about finding a suitable house. Li Yan thought. He turned on the computer and read the comments on his Weibo. Today's Weibo comments are still quite prosperous, and readers commenting that he will be kidnapped or analyzed tomorrow. Li Yan is already numb. However, he came to look at the blog not for their comments, but for the announcement of a game company. Recently, a company has bought the copyright of his novel and developed an online game. He is looking at the recent popularity of online games. Degree. However, the most famous fan in the comment area, the one with the net name, has not yet been online to spray him. This is the only good thing that makes him comfortable today. Suddenly, he heard something downstairs. Li Yan walked to the balcony and listened curiously. "What's the matter?" As expected, because the novel hasn't been updated, there is no way to open a new map. "You shamelessly Yusuji, I have to scold you today, it." After Gabriel scolded loudly, a series of scolding comments with the ID name went online. "Hurry up and go to hell, Yusuji." Li Yan quietly looked at his computer screen not far away, and was silent for a long time. "It's better to move." Chapter 5 Half Angel, Half Demon. In the early morning, the first ray of sunlight from the window shone into the bedroom. Li Yan opened his eyes in a daze and got up. Those lazy eyes were extremely comfortable. "Good day. After all, the inspiration suddenly broke out last night, and I wrote several chapters of A&D level articles in a row, and suddenly pushed the progress of the novel to 50%. It has not been so refreshing for a long time. The head still hurts a bit, although the wound has stopped bleeding." Li Yan touched his head, thinking. This bandage was regarded as the return of the fallen angel girl, and the bandage was quite professional. Maybe it was also the one hit last night, and maybe it got inspiration. If you don't have any inspiration next time, just go out and have a good fight. Li Yanyu thought about it leisurely. Wearing a vest and shorts, got up and took a toothbrush to go to the bathroom. He looked at the calendar and saw the key dates for tomorrow. Tomorrow, it's time for the first meeting. Li Yan thought. Tomorrow is Saturday, the day of the bunko gathering that Kagurazaka Ayam has always emphasized. That day was the 15th anniversary of the establishment of Sanhei Library. As a company that has been struggling to develop and only recovered after 10 years, it has always attached great importance to the cohesion of all writers and staff, as well as the contribution of every rookie writer. Hifulai also surpassed Kadokawa Library, which is the main reason why Li Yan chose Sanhei Library. However, although Li Yan has only had a cooperative relationship with Sanhei Library for more than 2 months, Li Yan still had a small twist in his cooperation experience with Sanhei Library. When the first volume of Super Academy War was released, he was taken by Sanhee Library. Directly rushed to print and publish, the advertisement and the recommendation of other writers sold 45,000 copies in the first week. Originally, everyone held a celebration banquet for him, but because he suddenly received a threatening anonymous letter, he had to cancel it. I heard that the president of Wenko has always regretted it. So no matter what, we must work harder to repay their trust. Good morning. When I just went out, a petite girl at the computer desk knocked and hit the mouse and greeted casually. Morning, Miss Gabriel. Li Yan replied in a daze, and walked into the bathroom. Suddenly, Li Yan's eyes widened and poked his head out of the washing room, with toothbrushes in his mouth, and looked at the suspicious characters appearing in the room in shock. Suits, shirts, leather shoes, all ready. Perfect. While waiting for the traffic lights, Li Yan checked the glass of a shop next to him. He should be well dressed and handsome. After all, as a master gradually recognized, you should pay attention to your own image. In fact, he still has a little confidence in his appearance, and he is quite suitable for wearing a suit. Well, this time we must perform perfectly in front of the company and the writer. Li Yan tightened his tie, his eyes were a little nervous, and he quietly made up his mind. Yesterday, he was almost like a divine helper. He wrote tens of thousands of words of novel plots throughout the day. Especially under the reminder of Gabriel, his inspiration continued to hit him, and he finally wrote 85% of the words and plot. Even when he saw the witch editor Kagurazaka Ayam, he had enough confidence to explain, and his body was much straighter than before. Today, I'm going to attend the 15th anniversary banquet of Sanhee Library. Finally, I'm going to meet that group of monsters in the light novel world. Although only limited to the authors signed by Sanhee Library, in the environment where other library companies temporarily lack powerful new works, Sanhee Library temporarily occupied the limelight of the times. Many writers who Li Yan cares about can meet with their own eyes today. Although at first I thought that Miss Irie Kashiwagi and Miss Gabriel looked like a troublesome person, but after a little communication these days, they still feel that they are actually good people. Li Yan squeezed his chin and wondered, did he get used to being alone, but betrayed the kindness of these strangers? While Li Yan was still thinking alone, several full-time mothers who were waiting for the traffic lights together couldn't help but also looked at this young man who seemed to be still in high school. Li Yan never knew that, just like Ying Lily's evaluation, although his personality is still moderate and plain, his appearance is also sunny, and a little bit stubborn, but there is always an inadvertent spirit full of temperament around him, almost okay. Become a genius and compensated dating boy, but I have not been aware of it. Why are they looking at me? Is there anything stuck behind me? Li Yan was a little curious and couldn't help but touch his back. Mom, can't you go there yet? The little girl who was waiting with her mother pulled a middle-aged woman and asked. Not yet, you have to wait until the green light comes on before you can pass. The mother said. The little girl with two braids sighed and said, it's so boring, I want to go home to see Tiga. Koizi, don't run around. A mother talked to a 5 or 6-year-old girl holding a balloon while chatting with her friends. Yes. The little girl replied with a smile. But just now, when a strong wind blew by, the balloon in the hands of this little girl named Koiza flew directly towards the crossroads where there was still a red light. Because of the heat island effect, the airflow in the city has not been very stable. When Li Yan was blown by the strong wind and felt refreshed at first, he saw a balloon flying past him. Immediately afterwards, he also saw the little girl hurriedly chasing after her unconsciously. Staring blankly at the expression of the little girl chasing the balloon without panic, Li Yan heard the sudden braking sound of a car, and the words of Kagurazaka Calamus echoed in his mind. Forgive me. Kagurazaka-san. Li Yan didn't react, and suddenly he burst out with great power, gritted his teeth and rushed up. What a joke! How could he be defeated by a joke made by Ms. Kagurazaka? Li Yan had already stepped out and swiftly reached out to hug the little girl without having time to think about it. Kuizi! The middle-aged woman yelled in surprise. With the speed limit of 40 km per hour on the road, and the brakes so hurriedly, Li Yan glanced at the Toyota Crown sedan that rushed over. At least there was still a certain speed coming here. The child was probably injured. Can't push it over, who knows if there is a car on that road over there. He took the little girl's hand for an instant, and pulled it back directly. At that moment, he judged that he could not directly pull the still-running little girl back, and the little girl sat on the sidewalk with a butt. Sand. The brakes for an instant knocked Li Yan into the air. At a speed of more than 20 km per hour, Li Yan's weight of 120 kilograms was still flying. His eyes were full of fear. Next time, you must not let Kagura-Kazan speak such terrifying language. Are you okay? The car stopped, and a young girl hurriedly got out of the car, ran to Li Yan's side, and asked nervously. It hurts. I don't feel that there is no compensation of 200,000 yuan. I should be unable to stand up. Li Yan said, covering his okay thigh. When this 19-year-old girl heard this, she was slightly taken aback, thinking that there should be nothing wrong. However, within 2 seconds of reaction, this person can make the best judgment, which deeply shocked the girl. Who is this man sacred? In the hospital, after a full-body examination, Li Yan had no problems except for the scars from the fight, as well as some abrasions. Of course, how could a car hurt me? Li Yan put on his clothes and thought arrogantly. However, although he planned to make the female college student named Yakoshita Yoshino pay him 200,000 mental damages, but now this girl has always treated this accident with a sincere attitude. Almost all the wounds were left from his own fights, and I no longer plan to demand that normal compensation. Hey! Li Yan noticed Swexia Yangne, who was waiting at the door, and found that Swexia Yangne seemed to have seen the scars on his upper body. Some were frightened. He asked with some embarrassment, although the man's upper body, it is true that you can watch it casually, but you should not watch it openly, Miss Yakoshita. Sorry. Swexia Yangne looked at him sincerely and said after bowing immediately, I'm really sorry, I didn't pay attention to hurt you. Li Yan was taken aback for a moment, and turned out to be a character in the world of light novels. Immediately, he shook his hand and joked, it's okay. After all, this is an accident. You have not violated the traffic rules. It is enough to let the child go home safely. And you have fulfilled your obligations, let alone no 100. The speed of more than kilometers can't hurt me at all. Li Yan said something very domineering, leaving Swexia Yang confused. However, Li Yan's only remaining suit was also badly damaged. Li Yan looked at the suit jacket distressedly, and sighed slightly. If he used to go to the banquet, how would he explain it? However, I looked at my old mobile phone and it was completely scrapped, but when I saw it in the hallway, at 11:30, his face turned blue, and it was almost 12 o'clock. He immediately put on a suit and talked to Swexia. Yang Nai said, that's it, Miss Swexia Yang Nai, right? Now you have done your duty. I have something to do. Let's go. Swexia Yang was taken aback for a moment, and then followed him, and said, wait a minute, Mr. Li. Of course this won't work. The compensation you told me is at least necessary. Can you leave your contact information and bank account number? No need, Miss Yang Nai, I already know that you are a good person, this is enough. Li Yan hurried to the elevator, smiled apologetically, and hurriedly said. Yang Nai was taken aback, and even thought she was still a good person. Really, interesting person. Yang Nai also got into the elevator and grabbed Li Yan's clothes directly, panting slightly, but then she still showed her natural smile and said, it's a blessing that you are okay. If you are compensated, I will directly hit you. In the account, in any case, if it is not your shot, it is estimated that there will be worse results. In any case, you are my benefactor and I will try my best to repay your loss. It looks like you are rushing to a place, then, wouldn't it be alright if I just drive you over? Swexia Yang Nao said, looking at Li Yan with faint eyes. Really, don't you need compensation? Shuezia Yang asked again when he was in the car. Although I really need money, I will even do some tricks for some small money, but there are not many honest people in this world, and I don't want to make honest people's money. The most important thing is that now the little girl, and you do not have things are the greatest wealth. Isn't that enough? Li Yan said eloquently from the co-pilot seat. Yang Nai was silent for a while, then smiled. Then, the favor still needs to be paid back, Jun Li, let's add a contact information. If you need my help in the future, I will try my best to help you. Although I don't have many strong connections in Tokyo, I still have them in my hometown of Chiba. Some methods are profitable and harmless. Swexia Yangna said with a smile. Makes sense. Li Yan thought, it was true, after all, it seemed like Miss Everyone. The car stopped at the entrance of the Ginza Hotel. Li Yan wore this somewhat torn suit and got out of the car. After saying goodbye to Yang Nao, he walked into the hotel. So that's it, I went to the gathering of Sanhee Bunko on the second floor. Swexia Yangna was in the parking lot, handing the tip to the waiter, thinking. However, after receiving a call from her cell phone, Yang Nai smiled and said, Suno. It has been dealt with properly. The other party is a bad guy and doesn't need us to compensate, but it is estimated that we will need to contact it in the future. Okay, I will pick you up right now, we are going back to Chiba. She closed the phone, but opened it again, and looked at the phone's software. Then, in the future, please give me your advice, Master of Light Novel. Yakoshita Yangne said to the line account with a happy smile. Chapter 7 I am your book fan. On the second floor of the Ginza Hotel in Tokyo, Japan, take the glass elevator and forget the second floor. This is the most expensive commercial area in Tokyo. It seems that the development of Sanwa Bunko for 15 years is really not bad. It was close to 12 o'clock, when Li Yan had just arrived at the entrance of the venue. He was stopped by two people wearing overalls. Hello, excuse me, are you Li Yan, Mr. Li? The middle-aged man asked with a signature smile. Yes, may I ask you who are you? Li Yan was taken aback and asked. We are an employee of a clothing store and a specialist who specializes in serving VIP senior members. A lady has ordered a suit for you and let us wait for you here. Do you want to go to our special car to change your clothes or do you return? Can I change my home afterwards? The middle-aged man's voice was frustrated and powerful, very polite and elegant, which made Li Yan stunned. When Li Yan heard the lady, he suddenly thought of the eldest lady who drove the crown car, Chiba girl Yukino Yakoshita. On the way to get into the car with her, he noticed that this 19-year-old college student had secretly taken pictures of him. The technique was very delicate and professional. He thought it was just uploading to Moments. It turned out to be our clothing store. The commissioner was waiting for him directly at the destination. It's really amazing, Miss Swexia, I just knew what I needed most at that time. Li Yan was secretly surprised, thinking that at this moment, he was also very grateful to this thoughtful Chiba beauty, and said, I'll change my clothes in the hotel toilet. Thank you for your hard work. Where, after all, you are an important person to Miss Swexia, we will serve you wholeheartedly. The middle-aged waiter bowed slightly and said with a smile. What important person? Li Yan was taken aback for a moment, looking at the middle-aged man in the clothing store and a young girl employee who had just graduated. However, something was read in the middle-aged man's smile and the girl's curious and shy expression. Wait a minute, what are you thinking? Not what you think, really. Li Yan thought. He planned to buy it by himself, immediately coughed a few times, looked at them seriously, and asked, "Excuse me, how much is this suit?" Li Yan secretly thought, hoping that it would not exceed 20,000 yuan. Because Ms. Yakoshita said, "Probably this suit is not tailor-made, it will not fit properly, so I just took a relatively ordinary one for you to wear at will. The price is about 400,000 yen. The middle-aged staff smiled and said. Li Yan was a little surprised when he heard the price. That's okay, it didn't cost her money. He smiled, and after saying goodbye to the clothing store employee, he turned and left, going to the toilet to change his clothes. But when he walked into the toilet, he held the door, his eyes were in a trance, his heart was racing, his breathing was difficult, his limbs were weak, and his head was sweating profusely. After all, the suit he wore, which was bought at a flea market for 10,000 yuan, was already considered the most high-end clothes. 400,000 suits were just bought for him at random. What's the matter with this young lady? Li Yan was silent for a while, took out his mobile phone, and sure enough, saw the first message from the young line. Yano Yakoshita, wearing a dark grey suit will make you look more handsome. I wish you a smooth banquet. I will remember this favor. He sighed softly and realized that this girl was too powerful. Kagurazaka Ayam, who was waiting in the venue, stood quietly at the reception desk waiting for the two important writers who were about to be late. What's the matter? Suddenly, the two most important guests didn't arrive. They were all scheduled to be late together, right? Maybe I'm going to be scolded by the old man and chief editor again, really. Kagurazaka Ayam shook his head in annoyance, thinking. Miss Kagurazaka. Li Yan walked into the venue, and after seeing his acquaintance Kagurazaka Iris, he was in a good mood and said hello and walked over. Kagurazaka Ayam was taken aback for a moment, then smiled happily, and said, Yusuji-sensei, you are finally here. She walked over with a smile, and then faced Li Yan, who was in a comfortable mood. When she was close enough, she showed a grim smile, which made Li Yan frightened. She asked, I've been waiting outside. You half an hour, you clearly remembered to remind you to leave early at 7 o'clock in the morning, right? Speaking of which, I am late for such a thing, and you are also responsible, Ms. Kagurazaka. Li Yan frowned. Kagurazaka Ayam was taken aback for a moment, and curiously asked, my responsibility? Li Yan looked at her coldly and said, do you still remember what you said the other night? I actually had a car accident. I was lucky to come over to the banquet unharmed. Kagurazaka Ayam looked at him in surprise, and then he began to think about it, and said, is it really that accurate? Although my colleagues say that 70% of my jokes can come true, but the flag is so accurate. It's so easy to do, and I have been skeptical of this statement. 70% accuracy rate. So high, are you a matchmaker? Li Yan looked at Kagurazaka Iris in amazement, and someone had calculated the accuracy rate. Say something nice to me next time. Li Yan said. I know, then next time you will encounter a good thing that not everyone can encounter, right? Isn't this going to work? Kagurazaka Ayam said with a smile. Li Yan breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, that couldn't be better. Kagurazaka Ayam looked at today's Li Yan for a moment, smiled and said, well, what I wore today is very handsome. It seems that you really value this party. People depend on clothes. Today you look pretty good. Really? Li Yan was in a pretty good mood after listening. Yeah, I thought you would continue to wear that suit with a guide of around 10,000 yuan. Look, isn't my prediction wrong this time? Kagurazaka Ayam said cheerfully. Li Yan quietly looked at Kagurazaka Icarus, who was relieved. He always felt that there were many unsolved mysteries in this world, and human beings were still so ignorant. While Li Yan was chatting with Kagurazaka Ayam, suddenly, a short high school boy came over and was holding a pile of printed manuscripts. He looked like a high-spirited teenager. After seeing Li Yan, showing a puzzled look. World, my sister is teacher Huang Man evaluation, A++. When Li Yan was reminded by the system, he realized that this person and Kagurazaka Ayam are in the same world. Now that the living characters are in front of him, if it were not for the automatic review of the system, I really didn't know that they were on his side. The world is all avatars. Miss Kagurazaka, and hello. The high school student smiled and nodded to Li Yan. You just came here, teacher Izumi. Kagurazaka Ayam smiled and said, I will introduce you to this, but this great writer doesn't like being known by too many people. After introducing him to you, it's better not to publish it, otherwise tomorrow. There is a pile of blade envelopes at the door. Li Yan shivered as soon as he heard the blade. Could it be the Yusuji teacher who wrote the Super Academy War series? The high school student writer suddenly looked surprised, and even the papers he was holding fell down, looking at Li Yan. Why did you really guess the blade right away when you mentioned it? Li Yan made a thud in his heart, always feeling that his social situation is not very good. Yes, my real name is Li Yan. I am a foreign student. I am glad to meet you. Li Yan said with a smile while looking in his eyes. Yes, it is. The young man smiled excitedly and said, My name is Izumi Masamune, my fate and pen name are Izumi Masamune, and I have always been a fan of your teacher and your book. Chapter 8 The Love-Hate Paranoid writer Masamune Izumi is a light novel writer who won the Light Novel Newcomer Award. It should be said that he can get the Newcomer Award when he was in high school. It is only natural that he considers himself a genius. However, after getting to know Li Yan, this part-time writer in the first grade showed him almost to the point of admiration for Li Yan. He always showed a happy and bright smile and began to speak seriously about Li Yan. Personal understanding of the Super Academy War written. On the third day when the first volume was released, I knew about this book. I bought this book decisively and looked at it. It turned out to be out of control. It's really wonderful. No matter if the protagonist was born in an ordinary the country family has superpowers because they came into contact with the spirit in the forest. The next step is to step by step from the weakest student, after experiencing wonderful adventures and friends' approval, step by step, relying on their own efforts and will to finally come to it. It took 2 days to become a major force in the academy. I read 3 volumes without missing a word. Masamune Izumi excitedly said, hardly relied on any peddling, or the role of Shurikang, but it made the readers moved by the friendship in the story, and although there are few love scenes, it makes people look forward to it. I haven't seen it for a long time. It's so orthodox, but it's a novel, passionate story. So I also really learned that Yusuji-sensei, you must be a genius writer who accurately conveys your heart to the hearts of readers. It's really amazing. Li Yan was a little embarrassed when he heard it. He smiled and scratched the back of his head, and asked, Is it really as exciting as you said? It should be said that my eloquence can't describe my deeper reading feelings. The biggest purpose of my coming to the party today is to be able to see teacher Yusuji in person. Masamune Izumi made a fist, saying as if he was talking about his beliefs. Thank you very much, but hearing you say that, it's too exaggerated. Li Yan said with a wry smile. However, Li Yan looked at Izumi Masamune's eyes, that pair of passion for light novels and a sense of perseverance. In the future, this newcomer award winner will definitely be able to stand at a higher position. After all, it is edited by Kagurazaka Ayam. Ability cannot misunderstand people. Well, are you here? Well, I will pick you up right now, you are the only thing here. While Li Yan and Izumi Masamune were exchanging their experiences, Kagurazaka Ayam received a call. She turned off the phone and said with a smile to Li Yan and Izumi Masamune, Excuse me, I will pick someone up now, although it's 2 o'clock, but the hotel's official dinner time is at 12:30. On the one hand, I hope that the writers can make friends and communicate with each other in half an hour, just like you are like-minded. On the other hand, I hope you can make friends and communicate with each other in half an hour. And also take care of the writer who came from other places. It's still the last one. I drove to pick her up. Are you busy? Li Yan nodded and said. Thanks. Izumi Masamune bowed slightly and said. As for the bowing etiquette, Li Yan is still not used to it. Although the bowing etiquette was first passed to Japan from the Central Plains, now China has replaced bowing with a handshake, but Japan has remained unchanged. Besides, his waist was still aching. After watching Kagurazaka Ayam leave, Li Yan saw that in this luxurious hotel, many writers had already become a small group. They were communicating with each other, and many of them heard some familiar pen names of popular writers. However, it seems that his name has not been heard by the writers over there just now. It is probably because of too noisy, which is considered a kind of luck. Li Yan doesn't like too many people knowing his identity. It's really the same feeling as a group of heroes. The elites of Sanhei Library are here. Li Yan thought. Ms. Yusuji, wait for me, I'll take you to introduce it to you later. Masamune Izumi was squatting on the ground nervously looking back at the dropped documents, and said to Li Yan who was in a daze. Li Yan came back to his senses and immediately leaned down to help pick it up together, only to find that these were actually printed novel manuscripts. He couldn't help but ask, is the manuscript of the novel? Yes, I originally planned to take advantage of Ms. Kagurazaka's presence here, and hope she can help me review the manuscript again. So that's it, can I take a look? Li Yan suddenly became interested. He hadn't seen the work written by this newcomer who liked his work so much. After reading a few lines, he became a little interested and asked. Masamune Izumi was taken aback for a moment, then he reacted and said, Dang, of course, please. For reviewers, of course, you need to find a quiet place. Now the quietest place on the second floor is at a conference table seat in the corridor. Li Yan took the large pile of manuscripts and placed them neatly on the table. Go up and start to look at it for yourself. Although he can directly use the editing system in his consciousness to complete it in a few seconds without anyone else, since he volunteered to review Masamune Izumi's novel, he naturally needs to read it carefully with his own eyes. According to the structure of light novels, a manuscript with more than 100,000 words is only a few hundred words per page, so it can be read very quickly. Zhengzong Izumi sat nervously next to Li Yan, always wanting to ask this master's opinion, but after seeing Li Yan's focused eyes, he didn't dare to bother. It took 20 minutes to read the 110,000 word manuscript, including the project plan and the first volume of the main text. Li Yan was silent, somewhat unable to speak. It should be said that there are still merits. After all, it is a work written by a professional writer. It is only slightly rough in the portrayal of the characters and the arrangement of the plot, and is too obsessed with some ability settings to let the fighting plot. It doesn't seem to be very exciting. These are mistakes that are easy for authors who lack deep writing experience to make. What's more, it's the plot of this book about my sister. The love scene is too heavy, and it almost occupies a quarter of the plot of the hot-blooded novel. Li Yan squinted, wondering why he wrote about the ambiguous daily routine with his sister so intensively. Soon, Li Yan used the editing system again to start scanning, so as not to make a mistake in his own judgment. Work name, Valkyrie Armor Evaluation, C and Suggestion. As a hot-blooded novel, it lacks enough blood and is more inclined to love and fantasy. The character description is not deep enough. The plot should be more profound. You can consider modifying the details of contradictions and conflicts. C+, just missed B, the lowest level that can barely publish a book, and Li Yan's judgment is no problem. Teacher Izumi. Li Yan put down the manuscript, looked at Izumi Masamune, and said with some embarrassment. Masamune Izumi shook his head and said seriously, How dare you not call yourself a teacher in front of Yusuji-sensei? Please call me Izumi, No, call me authentic, although it is abrupt. I hope you can be my senior, it's even better to be friends. Masamune Izumi smiled embarrassedly and looked at him with expectant eyes. It is good. Li Yan understood that since he wanted to be a friend, he would say what he should say. After the hotel elevator was opened, a beautiful girl with long black hair walked out, with a dour and unparalleled face that always had a sense of indifference. She was wearing a black coat, but she still couldn't hide her graceful figure. The pair of beautiful legs in black stockings under the skirt were perfect, and her demure and elegant temperament gave the whole person an indescribable sense of sacredness. When the elevator was just opened, the warm wind from the corridor blew into the elevator, causing the girl's long hair to move. If this is not a beautiful girl, there is almost no girl in the world who can be qualified to take up this reputation. Zayas Hikiyoshiu, this is her real name. She is a genius literary girl who wrote the 4-volume Love Metronome and is currently a sophomore in high school. Holding a novel that she had read countless times in her hand, she came to this small world of light novel writers. It's here. Xiao's Hikiyoshiu thought. Kagurazaka Ayam is still looking for a parking space, so she comes here first by herself. She looked at it, and soon, she saw a voice in the far corner, as if discussing novels. Xiao's Hikiyoshiu was silent for a while and walked over. My opinion is that this book cannot be recognized by the market for the time being. Although there are many good settings and stories in it, these are not enough. You said that it took you to write more than 100,000 words in 2 days. The speed is really amazing. But the novel is not speed, but an art. Li Yan's voice stunned the young girl slightly. She hid behind the corner wall and listened curiously to the conversation between the two. Although I know that Senpai and Kagurazaka-san would say so. Then please tell me what to improve, please, Yusuji Senpai. Izumi Masamune said with a smile. There are some mistakes that are easy to make, the plot is not well portrayed, the character setting is not prominent enough, and why do you have to write a love experience of 110,000 words and 30,000 words? Are you not writing a passionate light novel? Li Yan asked suspiciously. The story of love is pretty good, isn't it? Even if it is a hot-blooded novel, it should be enough to impress readers. Izumi Masamune said confidently. It is true. Recently, in many hot-blooded comics and light novels, the plots of love have taken up a lot of ingredients, and some are even very successful. No, although I wrote some, but you still misunderstood the concept of hot-blooded adventure. A truly successful hot-blooded work will not be too obsessed with the plot of the love part. Li Yan said directly, since you are writing a passionate novel, you should firmly grasp the passionate story, the collision of power and soul between your partners, and the enemy, the setbacks and reversals you have experienced. Let that a personal experience and touch that will resonate with readers is the essence of passion forever. Xiao's Hikiyoshiu nodded slightly. I understand, sure enough, the first time I wrote a purely passionate novel, I really lacked experience. Senior Yusuji, you are also quite good at writing romance plots, don't you think about writing a romance-themed novel? Izumi Authentic asked curiously. I don't know how to write this type of novel, and I will never write. Li Yan said coldly. Suddenly, the girl hiding in the corner shook slightly. Why? Izumi Masamune asked in surprise. Although hot-blooded novels have a lot of fictional plots, most people should have real feelings about family affection, friendship, and the enthusiasm toward the future of life goals, right? Li Yan showed disdain in his eyes, looked at Izumi Masamune, and said, but love, especially the ideal love like a fairy tale, is almost non-existent. Love novels are the product of the dream of bewildering a group of students who have never been in love. Not only there is no so-called love, but even ideals and friendship cannot be understood as a result. I always brainwash others with the argument that love is greater than heaven and earth is greater than everything. I would not write such things that lack nourishment. A chill radiated from Li Yan's whole body. After quietly speaking, there was still a wave of hatred in his eyes, which quickly passed by, and he was back to the original state. That kind of provocative tone, almost reaching the arrogant tone of paranoia, echoed in the ears of the young girl, thoroughly angering the young girl writer who had never met before. Chapter 9 Shiu's counterattack. At 12:30 at noon, the Ginza Hotel remembered the melodious music. Both Li Yan and Masamune Izumi, who had a surprised and complicated expression, were attracted by such music. Dear Sanhiwenko contracted writers, I am sorry to disturb you. Now the banquet is ready, please take a seat at the banquet. Thank you for your cooperation. The broadcast quietly broadcasted a clear and beautiful female voice, which was repeated 3 times. The banquet belonging to the writers officially began. The banquet has already begun. Li Yan stood up and said to Hekwan Masamune. Masamune Izumi nodded and said, Yes, Yusuji-senpai, the banquet seats are arranged according to the editor in charge. Senpai, you and I are both contracted writers of Kagurazakazan, so we will also sit at the same banquet. Come on, let's go in together now. Okay, let's go in, don't let everyone wait for a long time. Li Yan said with a smile. At this moment, Li Yan felt a gentle and steady feeling, which made Izumi Masamune breathe a sigh of relief. Masamune Izumi understands that everyone has a preference for novel series and needs to respect and understand their personal preferences. However, he is also worried that the author Yusuji he admires is not an ordinary reader, but a writer. These leaking the words out is expected to arouse dissatisfaction between the authors and readers of love novels. Don't let the romance novel writers sitting here hear it, otherwise Yusuji will offend half of the light novel industry. Masamune Izumi thought secretly. Ding! The elevator opened the door again. Kagurazaka Icarus came out of the elevator and saw Shiu Kazumajayaka, who was quietly leaning on the wall, looking back at her. She curiously asked, Why are you standing there, didn't you go in? I'm waiting for you. I'm here for the first time. I'm not familiar with the environment for the time being. After Syazhiki Shiu was silent for a while, she smiled calmly and said. However, even the thoughtful Kazumajayaka Shiba, the hands that clenched unconsciously still let Kagurazaka Ayam notice something. Syashiza is angry. Kagurazaka Iris is curious who is so capable to provoke this deep Kazumi Shiza in the castle? In the dining area of the luxurious Ginza Hotel, the golden chandelier brings a warm luster to the dream space of the glass structure. The white meal supplements are placed with reflective tableware, courteous waiters, and a bottle of water. A bottle of high-quality red wine was delivered to the table, and everyone sat in their seats. Undoubtedly, the banquet seat of Kagurazaka Ayam is the strongest writer camp in the entire Sanwa library. Most of the contracted writers have anime-like work qualifications, which attracts the attention of other authors. It includes the super best-selling novelist Kishaomura Masaru, who is a national treasure of Sanhi Bunko, and Kasako Shiko, the strongest romance novel master of the bunko. And, Yusuji heard that a newly emerging writer who had no public information at all had come here, but he didn't know which of these 3 people was. On the left of Li Yan is Kagurazaka Icarus, on the right is Izumi Masamune, and on the opposite side, there is a beautiful girl with a long straight black that makes people feel amazing. Beauty. Li Yan's eyes widened, wondering. Not only him, but everyone sitting there, including men and women, felt so emotional.